The Uzumaki Clan. This is Naruto's clan. Despite it being a powerful clan, known to have been distant cousins of the Senju and some of Konoha's greatest supporters, a clan so powerful that they had their own personal hidden village, there have been painfully few Uzumaki seen in the series. This is because the entire village was wiped out at some point in the past, right after Kushina traveled to Konoha, likely either toward the end of the Second Shinobi World War or the beginning of the Third. Having their clan be Order 66th, the remaining Uzumaki scattered to the wind, with the most notable members fleeing to Konoha, Ame, and Kusa. That being said, I can't help but wonder what would have happened had Karin and Naruto been raised together as siblings. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Ow, 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 ow! The feeling singed. It felt like being dipped into an acid bath. It was like his skin were melting right off. It felt like he was on fire. It was just a little alcohol on a cotton swab. Hold still, Naruto. It hurts though, he said. She pulled back for a moment and gave Naruto a deadpan stare. This was maintained until his inner fortitude broke down. He became submissive again. Upon seeing his soul defeated from the sudden glint in his eye, she went back to work. Cherry red hair, she looked just like her mother. The biggest difference between them, though, was the fact that she did wear glasses. She had what laymen called an astigmatism, and that required some glasses. Despite that, she was perhaps the most observant girl Naruto had ever met. She could almost always sense when something was wrong. She knew everything. He could not hide anything from her. "How did you get this cut on your cheek, Naruto?" she asked. "I accidentally ran into a swing set." She pulled back and gave him another deadpan stare. Naruto, defeated once again, looked away. "I got into a fight with Sasuke." Karin took a deep breath. "How many times do I have to tell you to leave that poor boy alone? Just because you have a crush on him doesn't give you the right to be a jerk, Karin. And just because you're an overprotective little brother doesn't give you the right to pick fights with him," she said. "I'm not a little brother, we're twins. Separated by a whole 15 minutes. 15 minutes younger, you're the little brother," she said. Naruto rolled his eyes. In truth, Naruto and Sasuke were both big personalities who tended to get on the worst side of the other. Just two hurt children with nowhere to put their boundless energy and pain. And so they focused it on each other. It seemed funny that whenever the two seemed to be down, they went straight for the other to get into some knockdown dragout. The old therapy session for the male creature. When life gave you lemons, you beat the crap out of it. Despite their constant talk of hating each other, they seemed so much to enjoy fighting with each other, and sometimes seemed excited to see each other or disappointed when the other couldn't make it. It was almost kinda funny that way. Relationships, characteristics within the mind, all of these things seemed so ephemeral. There was a saying people said for when they tried to make out the logic of the happenings of the world. They often said, "Who can understand the mind of God?" And this was true. It was only further proven that man could never truly understand how God's mind worked, because they tended not to understand how even their own did. What Naruto saw as a negative relationship filled with hate, Karin could detect was actually somehow a minor bromance between them. Like night and day, they were polar opposite, yet completely complementary, and never seemed quite whole without the other. Just as light and dark were undefined without contrast, so too were Naruto and Sasuke undefined without contrast. The boy who had it all and lost it versus the boy who had nothing and continually tried and failed to gain it. Each of these marks the two left on each other were like little love letters between brothers. If she didn't know any better, she might assume they were brothers. Secretly, she'd seen how they acted. They fought each other, yes. They picked on each other, yes. But the moment someone else picked on the other, whether it be Sasuke or Naruto, their equal and opposite was quick to stand up and declare that the only person allowed to pick on them was themselves. It was adorable. But what was more, they seemed to remind her a lot of each other. Something Karin tended to notice in people was that someone tended to hate someone who displayed near identical traits to themselves. Maybe it was because the person became the embodiment of everything they disliked in themselves. Perhaps it was that the person felt like someone being exactly like them devalued them as a person. This was why people say that opposites attract, because alike people creeped each other out. But even then, that was a partly inaccurate saying. It simply was that one could not affix a stern shape to something so enigmatic and abstract as the human being. The greatest mystery in life was the self, and the moment someone declared that they knew themselves completely, they admitted they had lost. Irreplicable, unable to occur by chance, the human mentality and spirit transcended the natural world and spoke of something as hidden and mysterious as the concept of I. But look at Karin over here, contemplating the meaning of life and the relationship between two hearts. This was the blessing and curse of Karin. She was blessed and cursed with the glorious ability that some had tended to call the mind's eye of the Kagura. For reference, Kagura meant entertainment. This was so named because it sometimes seemed that Karin had the ability to see the very inner workings of the human being, something that celestial beings far higher with far greater understanding viewed. This balance with an above-average intelligence, not bragging, caused her to think too much about everything. The mystery of life opened itself up to her like a classic mystery novel that kept her turning the page day after day. Even such an event as a small fight at school left her contemplating the very inner machinations of a human being. How wondrous and mysterious, intriguing and enthralling. She admitted that she would never be able to understand the mind of the human. After all, if the mind of God was unknowable and man were made in his image, then man too must have an unknowable mind. But it didn't stop Karin from trying. Perhaps one day she'd become a psychologist. Her innate abilities seemed to push her in that direction. Her uncanny ability to read the deepest parts of a human being, their very soul, as well as her beautiful yet primal ability to heal led her to believe that her path in life was predetermined, and that she would enter some field to explore the hearts, minds, and bodies of those around her. Called to do good and to explore the wonderful worlds that existed inside of every being, true beauty called out to her. Something beyond the reflected light that her slightly malfunctioning eyes required a thick glass pane to understand. Still, Naruto was right. She did have a crush on Sasuke, and maybe to a point that caused her to favor him. That was another mystery of life, the mystery of love, of infatuation, why it began, why it persisted, why it sometimes died. Floating on the winds of fate, bound to the whims of the heart, it too remained something she never would be able to understand. But she admitted that she didn't need to understand it. She could dig into it, but she feared the old wives' tale that pointing at a rainbow could cause it to vanish. As strong and as fragile as the human heart, love was as contradictory as anything else called human, and Karin was content to simply bask in its light while it existed, not caring to know why it existed, only that it did and was shining upon her, enjoying it for however so long as it did last. Placing a bandage over her brother's cheek, she pat his head and offered his cheek a kiss. "No more fighting, okay?" she said as she stood and made her way to the kitchen. How unfair of a command. How utterly impossible. She knew he would continue to fight anyway. It was an unspoken rule that the inescapable was inescapable. But all the same, perhaps the command was a wish for him to try to explore a relationship with Sasuke that didn't involve blood and gore, but instead maybe the understanding of two completely separate boys who could attain brotherhood without the bond of blood. Perhaps the opening of a gate that would bring him into the clan. Karin began working on supper. Naruto sat on the couch, his fingers lightly tracing over the laceration on his discolored cheek, atop the bandage that went across it. As he did so, he seemed deep in thought. Karin didn't even need to look at him to guess something was up. "What are you thinking about, Naruto?" she asked. "I was thinking about us. Why are we alone?" "Because our parents died when we were born," she said. "But why did they die?" Karin shrugged. "From what Mr. Hiruzen told us, it was because of the Nine Tails." "The one inside of us?" Naruto asked. Truth was, Karin and Naruto already knew that the Nine Tails was sealed inside of them. Hiruzen didn't wish to tell them. In fact, he attempted to hide it from them. But Karin had the ability to detect a liar as soon as she saw one, and Hiruzen found himself unable to hide himself from her deep-peering inner eye. And so this resulted in Karin detecting the truth. She and Naruto were the vessels of the nine-tailed demon fox. Its spirit split in two to ensure that it could not be whole. Yes, Naruto, the one in us. But how did it get out of our mother? Karin stopped for a moment and thought about it before going back to work, cooking up the rice. They say when a Jinchuriki's pregnant, the seal starts to waver. When giving birth, the chakra that's supposed to go into the seal goes to the baby. I assume that because they were surprised with two babies, the seal was strained too much and the Nine Tails got out. She was silent for a moment, feeling Naruto get a little tense. "Why do you ask?" she asked him. "Didn't they say that the reason why the Uchiha were all massacred was because they tried rising up against the leaf?" Karin recalled reading a news story about it. A couple years back, the Uchiha clan seemed to lose faith in Konoha and planned to betray them. This was caught early and the Anbu were sent in. During this, the few remaining Uchiha, as prideful as they were, felt it would be better for their clan to end rather than be disgraced and enslaved. So they proceeded to take their own lives, with only Sasuke surviving this due to being held back by Iruka. "And they tried rising up against the leaf because they were accused of unleashing the Nine Tails, right?" Naruto asked. Karin was growing more and more nervous the further down this line of thought Naruto was taking them. "It was disproven though," she said. "Yeah, but only after they all died, meaning they all died for nothing. They didn't unleash the Nine Tails," Naruto said. What are you saying, Naruto? Karin asked. Naruto was silent for a moment. Are the Uchiha dead because of us? Karin stopped moving for a moment. She turned around and looked back at him. What do you mean? No, of course not. How could it be because of us? Naruto looked up, his face pale and his eyes watery. The Ninetales escaped our mother because we were born. If we hadn't been born, the Ninetales would have never gotten out, and the Uchiha wouldn't have been blamed. Sasuke wouldn't have lost his family. Karin walked over to Naruto and knelt down beside him. Naruto, are you okay? He shook his head. Today, I got in a fight with Sasuke. I didn't pick it, he did. And as we were reaching the end, he told me that his family was dead because of me. Karin was dumbfounded. Naruto, you know that's not true. But it is, he said as his tears started to roll down his cheek. Maybe that's the reason why Sasuke hates me. Maybe that's the reason he'll never date you. It's because he hates us for killing his family. She hugged her little brother. No, Naruto, that's not it, and you know it. We didn't do anything wrong. For all we know, the Uchiha had been boiling on the concept of betraying Konoha for a while, and only jumped at it because they were given an excuse. After all, Konoha eventually proved that it had nothing to do with the Uchiha. If they waited long enough, they would have been exonerated and would have likely received reparations for the slandering of their clan's name. But no, they had to attack Konoha. And after they'd been put down, it was their decision to end their own lives. Konoha didn't make them do that. They did so like some crazed cult. The Uchiha have always been messed up. This likely would have happened with or without us. You don't know that, Naruto said. You're right, she said. I don't know it, but I also know that it's just as possible as saying it wouldn't have happened. We don't know. But based on what I've read about the Uchiha, it would have happened. For a group that's so willing to throw away the lives of its own women and children over the failure to rebel, there was a deeper evil locked away in that clan. And I refuse to believe that it had anything to do with us. I refuse to let you or myself be blamed for the deaths of a clan because we were just born. We did nothing wrong, not a damn thing. We had no control over the situation, and those who did have control, they chose wrong. I lay the deaths of the Uchiha at the feet of the Uchiha and them alone. They overreacted. I refuse to accept responsibility for it. Naruto sat there, tears still running down his face. Karin ran her thumbs over the streaks. Be calm, Naruto. Your life is a gift to this world, not a curse. And anyone who dares to say otherwise doesn't know enough about the world to tell us. Don't let something Sasuke said in emotion get to you. I'm sure he doesn't blame you. People sometimes say things they don't mean when they get angry. No, Naruto said. People only say what they mean when they're angry. Karin thought about this, and to a point, Naruto was right. People always said that they say things they didn't mean when they're angry, and while this is true, people did often attempt to hurt the other by saying hurtful things they knew wasn't true. It was also true that the barrier that kept people from saying what was truly in their hearts was gone during a fit of emotion. Sometimes the thoughts people thought but never wished to say would spill out. Sasuke meant every one of those words. I might not be able to somehow sense the truth like you do, but I knew deep in my heart that he meant those words. He blames us. Karin pulled her brother into a hug. If he does, then he's a fool. Suddenly, their smoke alarm started going off. Oh crap! She turns around to see the rice now on fire. She reaches for an extinguisher and begins to put it out. Naruto, somewhat apathetic to the fire they almost had, simply asks why she used a fire extinguisher when she knows water-style jutsu. Karin looks back. Because it was a grease fire. Water and grease don't mix. Putting water on it would have just splashed flaming oil everywhere. Karin then puts the extinguished pan in the sink and runs water over it to cool it down. She opens a window, turns on a fan, and then begins waving a pillow in front of the smoke detector. As she did so, she would look to Naruto. What kind of ramen do you want today? The next day, they headed to the academy where they proceeded to have somewhat of a normal day. But as the time came to eat lunch, Karin would pass by Sasuke's table. She'd look over to him and he'd look at her. What? He asks with a tongue sharp enough that it felt like it could cut through steel. Karin wasn't intimidated. Did you tell my brother that it was his fault that your clan's dead? Maybe I did. What difference does it make to you? The difference is you made my brother very upset yesterday. I'm sorry about your clan, but we had nothing to do with that, Sasuke, and I'm not gonna stand here and let you blame my brother for it. You two can fight to your heart's content, but don't cross that line. He looked at her again. Cross what line? The truth? You two are the Ninetales, and it's because of the Ninetales being released, because of us being blamed, that my clan is dead. Karin slammed her hands down on the table and leaned over Sasuke. No, your clan is dead because you were a bunch of overdramatic babies who couldn't stand the fact that they were wrong. Neither I nor Naruto were the one that had your clan drinking the Kool-Aid, nor were we the ones that told them to attack the leaf. That was all your dumbass clan's fault. They're dead now because they chose to be. If you want to blame anyone for that, try laying it at the feet of the people actually responsible. Accept that your clan simply doesn't like to accept responsibility and be done with it. Sasuke was fuming. He stood up. You dare to impugn upon my clan's honor? She pushed him back down into the seat. I would if your clan had any. They got accused of something they didn't do. Whoop-de-doo. I get accused of stuff all the time. You don't see me trying to overthrow the government. I'm not trying to be insensitive, Sasuke, but you're not the only one who's ever felt pain. So either suck it up and deal with it or take it somewhere else. Some of us don't have time to be crybabies. That's easy for you to say. You've never experienced loss. Karin slapped him upside the face. Never experienced loss. We're orphans, the same as you. Living with the demon, literally everyone blames for it. We can't lose what we never had. At least you have fond memories to call back on. We have nothing but the bad times, the questions of what our family was actually like. You may have lost your family, but so did we. The difference was we're not blessed enough to know who they were, and instead are spit upon for merely being alive. By this time, Karin was attracting the full attention of the class. She was now leaning over Sasuke, who was still reeling. He hadn't expected a slap to the face, but Karin wasn't done yet. What happened to your clan was a tragedy, and I'm sorry about it, but don't you dare point your finger at us. The next time I hear you pointed your finger at my brother, blaming him for all your issues, I'm gonna rip it off and shove it up your— Miss Uzumaki, a voice said from behind. Karin turned around to see Irika had returned. What in the world are you doing? It's personal, Teach, she said. Personal or not, it's in the classroom, and we don't allow that here. Detention for the rest of the week. Karin looked back at Sasuke. She whispered in his ear, if you ever make my kid brother cry like that again, I'll make sure the next time we talk, I end up with an expulsion. She pulled back and looked down her nose at him. She then proceeded back to her chair. She sat down. The rest of the day, she remained there. As class let out, she and Naruto remained. He was told he didn't have to stay as he was not in detention, but he said he'd rather stay with his sister. Because they shared the same house together, an exception was made and Naruto was allowed to remain. Whether they were at home or not made no difference. They were gonna make the most of their time. They decided to do their homework, which they normally would do at home, wasting what little time off they had. Now, they might at least have more time to do what they wanted. I heard what the other kids said, Naruto said in a whisper. They said you're really laid into Sasuke, even slapped him around. Is that true? Karin nodded. Naruto sighed. You know I don't need anyone to defend me. I'm not a baby. I know you're not Naruto, but what he said to you affected me too. You're not the only one people blame for things. I was fighting for me as much as for you. You might have the right to tell me not to fight for you, but you don't have the right to tell me I can't fight for myself, she said. Naruto had to admit this was true. Still, if people think you fought for me, my reputation ends up damaged, and I'll gain notoriety as someone who's too weak to fight for themselves. Karin looked over. Sorry about that, but it sounds like overlap to me. We were both dishonored. You can't tell me not to do that. That's fair, I guess. But frankly, it surprised the crap out of me, Naruto said. I thought you were in love with Sasuke. Karin continued answering her questions. I am. Then how could you say those things to him? Do that stuff. Karin stopped the conversation for a moment to work on a particularly tricky math question. Once she had, she responded. Just because I love someone doesn't mean I'm gonna let them abuse me, nor will I let them abuse you. I have boundaries and limits, and Sasuke crossed them. So I hammered his little ninja hands to make sure he did not do it again. I might seek a relationship with him, but I'm not willing to sacrifice all honor for him. He has to have mutual respect for me if any relationship we cultivate is to work out. Naruto nodded. I wish I could be as mature as you, he said. I don't know why I'm not. You are, Naruto, just in another way. Boys are different than girls. Boys always were and always will be simple, and that's fine. Sometimes the best answer is the simplest. You're still growing as a person, and to be frank, my actions today were not mature. You choosing to let it go and not continue the thought was pretty mature. But besides that, she looked over. Who dictates what or what isn't mature? And who balances that with liberty and free will? Perhaps Sasuke needed a wake-up call. Let history judge me. If Sasuke ends up hurt worse or helped by what I say to him today, then we'll know if it was childish or mature. Same for you, Naruto. So don't put stock in judging yourself by others' standards. Don't feel the need to conform to this world and its views. The truth was laid bare in her words. The world could not judge when the world didn't truly know. Standards might be set for what is right and what is wrong, but as people change, so do the views that they hold. What once was good is now not, and what was once wrong is now right. And just as the sands of time wore away that view, eventually the view held currently will be ousted for another modern view, and those who existed now will be retroactively judged. That's why Karin didn't put much stock into what people told her was childish or what was mature, what was morally correct and morally wrong, because in the end, those views changed. She couldn't live by the standards of others, only by the morals she decided for herself. What it really boiled down to was grit. The hills Karin and Naruto would have to choose would all have to be hills they were willing to die on. They needed to be sure of their decisions because in the end, what others thought of them mattered little. Their lives in the current moment were living proof of that. Living as outcasts and pariahs, Naruto and Karin couldn't depend upon the help and views of their fellow villager. They had a right to be alive too, and they weren't responsible for any horrible events that transpired in the past. Karin would not live chained and shackled to the whims of others. If she did that, surely she'd have died long ago, because that's what the world desired to see happen to her. what it desired to see happen to Naruto. Karin would not have this. She would persevere in the face of adversity, not give in to it. If the world wanted to cast her as a villain, then let them. From her point of view, they were the villains for treating her and her brother with such disrespect for no apparent reason. Karin sighed as she thought these things. Once more, this was the mystery of the human heart, the contradiction that existed in all beings, the desire to help people, the want to do good to them despite the resentment they held toward you, and the resentment that you held toward them. Humans tended to shy away from truly caring for each other unless it benefited them. After all, selfishness and prioritizing self-preservation was but a natural response. But all the same, the desire to help and to do good to others, that truly was proof of the supernatural. The concept that one could love those who hated them and could care about those that they resented in kind. Humans were walking contradictions and randomness given form. Orderly chaos that existed, sandwiched between two hemispheres and shelled in bone. What did it mean to be human? Was being human determined by genetics? Was it determined by physical form? Or was it determined by mentality, by imagination, soul? To be human was to transcend nature and not be possible to replicate. One could not teach a machine to think like a human, and one could not expect a human to think like a machine. Just as something in DNA separated man from animal, something in the soul separated man from machine. Humans were fundamentally different creatures entirely. Their desires and motivations, none could be predicted or explained, and that was exactly what made them so fascinating. It was part of the reason why Karin enjoyed this odd ability, jutsu, whatever you wanted to call it. It allowed her to explore the core of what was called a person, and even allowed her to explore the randomness in her own heart. The contradiction that she could love someone as much as she loved Sasuke, and yet turn around and slap his face, insult him, and tell him to watch himself. Sometimes she wondered if it was possible that love and hate were one and the same. One could not exist without the other to give it contrast. But it was also true that loved, when damaged or lost, evaporated into the hollow feeling of pain and sorrow, into hatred. Sasuke was a burning example of this. Resentment brought on by the loss of love. Every force in the universe had an equal and an opposite, but were those two forces mutually exclusive? No. Sometimes the borders of one were defined by the borders of the other. But more than that, it seemed almost that they were the same. If one were to think about the color black as nothing more than a shade of white, then does that not mean that hatred is just a shade of love? The number 0 is a number that signifies emptiness, but it's also the number directly before 1 and directly after -1. Numbers extend in both directions infinitely, and 0 is right in the middle. So might two dueling concepts work? These were the thoughts of a girl who was blissfully driving herself mad with the conundrum of humanity. For humans so smart and adamant that they could understand anything, it turned out that the only thing in the natural world the human mind couldn't figure out was the human mind itself. These things Karin thought about all through detention as she and Naruto proceeded to study. But unbeknownst to them, another story was unfolding in the village. As the sun slowly began to move past its center at the apex of the sky, another person entered. His hair was red, and his headband portrayed 4 vertical slits on it. About the same age as Naruto and Karin, this boy had eyes full of wonder and fascination, gazing out into the world with amazement just as the world gazed into his eyes with the same. The boy's name was Nagato Uzumaki, and he was a very special boy. This boy possessed the same eyes that once belonged to the Sage of 6 Paths. Having been born of a mother who fled Uzushiogakure during its downfall, he now found himself here in Konoha. He did not yet know that he was far from the only Uzumaki to exist in this new village, to which he was an exchange student. As he moved forward, so too did the hands of fate, as they led the last 3 surviving members of the Uzumaki clan toward each other. For better or worse, they would soon meet, and only time would tell what the implications of such a meeting would be. And that's where I plan to pause the story for now. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what you thought, anything you'd like to have seen different, and anything you might like to see in the next episode. We love to hear from ya. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to click that like button to let YouTube know about it, and if you've yet to subscribe, be sure to do so. Until next time, peace out.